The Italian Mafia boss who swears to the black nurse that they will never break up. And no matter what. Some men make promises like they're spending loose change. Easy words. Cheap comfort. Gone by morning. Oronzo Fallaci wasn't that kind of man. Charlotte Clemente stood in the supply closet of Newark Beth Israel Medical Center, still wearing her navy blue scrubs from a 12-hour shift. Her locks were pulled back in a low bun, a few strands escaping near her temples. She smelled like antiseptic and exhaustion. The door clicked shut behind her. She didn't turn around. She already knew. His hand found the small of her back first, warm, steady. The kind of touch that made her forget she was supposed to be careful. "You can't be here," she whispered. And yet. His voice was low, unhurried. The accent still caught her after 8 months. Soft Italian edges that made even dangerous words sound like patience. He turned then. Took in the full sight of him. 6'3", shoulders that blocked the fluorescent glare, tattoos creeping past his collar, jaw set like he'd already decided how tonight would end. Oronzo Fallaci ran the Fallaci family. Every cop in Jersey knew his name. Every rival feared it. And he was standing in a hospital supply closet, watching her like she was the only exit in a burning room. "Enzo, if someone sees you..." "No one saw me. Your enemies are my concern, not yours." Charlotte exhaled slowly. 8 months of stolen moments. 8 months of burner phones and back entrances and pretending she didn't know what he did for a living. 8 months of him showing up anyway. Every single time. What happens when a man like that decides you're the one thing he won't let go of, and the people hunting him start to notice? If this is your kind of story, stay. Subscribe if you haven't already. And drop a comment. Let me know where you're watching from tonight. Now let's begin. Charlotte met Oronzo on the worst night of her life. 8 months ago she was working the emergency room when they wheeled in a man with 2 gunshot wounds to the chest. Dark suit soaked through. Security trying to keep out the 4 men who followed the stretcher. All of them built like soldiers, all of them refusing to leave. She was the one who got him stable. Kept pressure on the wound when the younger nurses hesitated. Talked the surgical team through the handoff without losing her composure. 3 hours later, when the man was out of surgery and breathing on his own, she found Oronzo waiting in the hallway. He wasn't one of the soldiers. He was the reason they existed. "That was my brother," he said. No introduction. No thank you. Just those 4 words, delivered like a fact he needed her to understand. Charlotte was too tired to be afraid. He's alive. He'll need physical therapy, but he'll walk again. Oronzo studied her for a long moment. She remembered thinking he looked like the kind of man who never asked for anything twice. "What's your name?" "Charlotte Clemente." He nodded once. Like he was filing it somewhere permanent. She should have walked away. Should have gone home, showered off the blood and forgotten his face by morning. Instead she asked, "Are you okay?" Something shifted in his expression. A crack in the granite. He didn't answer, but he also didn't leave. 3 days later, flowers arrived at the nurse's station. No card. No name. Just white roses, 12 of them, and a phone number written on the ribbon. She told herself she wouldn't call. She lasted 2 weeks. Their first conversation was 45 minutes long. He asked about her shift. Her commute. Whether she'd eaten dinner. He listened like every word mattered, like he was memorizing her voice for later. By the 3rd call she knew she was in trouble. By the 3rd month she knew she was in love. The secrecy started immediately. Oronzo explained it simply. "I have enemies who would use you to get to me. Until I handle them, no one can know." He understood. She didn't like it, but she understood. So they built a hidden life together. He picked her up in unmarked cars. They ate at restaurants in Philadelphia, in Connecticut, anywhere but Newark or New York. He never touched her in public, never held her hand where someone might see. But in private he was different. He memorized her schedule. Showed up with takeout when she worked doubles. Called her every night at 11 no matter where he was or what he was doing. Once she mentioned missing her grandmother's sweet potato pie. 2 days later he flew in a private chef from Atlanta who'd trained under her grandmother's cousin. Spent 8 hours recreating the recipe until Charlotte cried into the first bite. He never explained how he found the chef. She never asked. That was the deal. She stayed out of his business. He kept her separate from the violence. And in the space between, they pretended they were just 2 people who happened to find each other. But some nights she looked at him and saw the weight he carried. The calls he stepped away to take. The way his jaw tightened when certain names came up. She knew there was a rival. Someone named Marchetti. Someone who wanted everything Oronzo had built. She just didn't know how close the threat had gotten. Not until tonight. In the supply closet, Oronzo's hand moved from her back to her jaw, gentle. Deliberate. His thumb traced her cheekbone like he was checking that she was real. I need you to listen to me, he said quietly. Charlotte's chest tightened. What happened? Marchetti made a move. Put 2 of my men in the hospital this afternoon. She inhaled sharply. Which hospital? Not yours. But he's getting closer. Closer to what? Oronzo didn't answer right away. His eyes searched her face, and for the first time since she'd known him, she saw something that looked like fear. Not fear for himself. Fear for her. Closer to figuring out what matters most to me, he finally said. Charlotte pulled back slightly. Enzo. I'm not telling you this to scare you. I'm telling you because you deserve to know. And because I need you to trust me for the next few weeks. Trust you to do what? He stepped closer, closing the distance she'd created. His forehead touched hers. She could feel his breath, slow and controlled, the way he got when he was keeping himself steady. To keep you safe, he murmured. No matter what it looks like from the outside. She wanted to argue. Wanted to demand specifics, logistics, a plan she could examine and approve. But his hands were cradling her face now, and his lips brushed her forehead, and she realized she'd already made her choice about him months ago. Okay, she whispered. Okay. I trust you. His grip tightened. Just for a second. Like he was holding on to the words themselves. Then his phone buzzed in his pocket and the moment shattered. He pulled back, checked the screen, and his expression went flat. The man who'd been holding her was gone. In his place stood the boss. I have to go. Charlotte nodded, adjusting her scrubs, straightening her posture. Back to being Dr. Clemente. Back to being invisible. Same time tomorrow? She asked. He paused at the door. Looked back at her with something raw in his eyes. Every day, Charlotte. Every single day until this is over. Then he was gone. She stood alone in the supply closet for a full minute, heart pounding, trying to convince herself that everything was going to be fine. She almost believed it. 3 days later, Charlotte made a choice that changed everything. She was finishing her charting in the nurse's station when her supervisor appeared. Linda Okafor, a no-nonsense woman in her 50s who'd been running the emergency department since before Charlotte graduated nursing school. Clemente. My office. Now. Charlotte followed, her stomach already tightening. Linda didn't call private meetings unless something was wrong. The office was small. Cluttered with policy binders and framed photos of Linda's grandchildren. Charlotte stood near the door, hands clasped in front of her. Linda sat behind her desk and folded her arms. You want to tell me why 2 men in expensive suits were asking about you this morning? Charlotte's blood went cold. What? They came in around 7. Flashed some badges that didn't look quite right. Asked which shifts you worked, whether you had a boyfriend who you spent time with outside the hospital. What did you tell them? Linda raised an eyebrow. I told them to go to hell and come back with a warrant. But Charlotte, I need to know, are you in some kind of trouble? Charlotte's mind raced. Marchetti. Had to be. He was already looking for leverage, already trying to find the crack in Oronzo's armor. And he'd found her workplace. No, she said carefully. I'm not in trouble. But I think someone might be trying to cause problems for me. An X situation. Nothing I can't handle. Linda studied her for a long moment. Charlotte could feel the weight of her supervisor's experience, the years of reading patients and staff and knowing when someone was lying. You're one of my best nurses, Linda finally said. I don't want to lose you. But if this becomes a safety issue for you or for this hospital, I need to know. I understand. Do you? Charlotte met her eyes. Yes, ma'am. I do. Linda held her gaze for another beat, then nodded slowly. All right. Go finish your shift. But Charlotte, be careful. Whatever this is. Charlotte walked out of that office with her hands shaking. She waited until her break to call Oronzo. Used the burner phone he'd given her, the one she kept in a locked compartment in her locker. He answered on the first ring. What's wrong? She told him. Every detail. The men, the questions, Linda's warning. Silence on the other end. The kind of silence that meant he was already calculating, already planning. "Where are you right now?" he asked. "Break room. 3rd floor. Stay there. Don't leave the hospital. I'm sending someone. Enzo." "Charlotte." His voice was calm, but she heard the steel underneath. "I need you to stay visible. Stay around people. Can you do that for me?" She closed her eyes. "Yes." "Good. I'll see you tonight. Same place." He hung up before she could respond. The rest of her shift passed in a blur. She smiled at patients, checked vitals, administered medications, normal, professional. Invisible. But every time the elevator doors opened, every time someone walked past too slowly, she felt it. The awareness that she was being watched. Hunted. At 7 p.m. she clocked out and walked to the parking garage. A black SUV was waiting near her car. Tinted windows. Engine running. The driver's window rolled down. A man she recognized, Marco, one of Oronzo's most trusted soldiers, nodded at her. "Boss wants you at the safe house. I'll drive. Someone else will take your car." Charlotte hesitated. This was a line. On one side was her normal life, her independence, her ability to pretend she wasn't in love with a mafia boss. On the other side was whatever came next. He got in the SUV. The safe house was in Montclair. A brownstone that looked like every other brownstone on the block. Nothing remarkable. Nothing that would draw attention. Inside it was warm. Lived in. A fireplace crackled in the living room and Charlotte smelled something cooking, garlic and tomatoes and fresh bread. Oronzo was waiting in the kitchen. He'd taken off his jacket. His sleeves were rolled to his elbows, exposing the full sleeve of tattoos on his right arm. The black ink that told the story of his family, his rank, his sins. He was stirring something on the stove and when he looked up at her, his expression softened. "You came. You sent a car. I sent an option." He turned off the burner and crossed the room to her. "You could have said no. Gone home. Pretended none of this was happening." Charlotte shook her head slowly. "I don't think that's possible anymore." He stopped in front of her. Close enough to touch but not touching. His eyes moved over her face, cataloging, checking. "Are you okay?" "I'm scared," she admitted. "But I'm here." Something flickered across his features. Guilt maybe. Or gratitude. It was hard to tell with him sometimes. "This isn't what I wanted for you," he said quietly. "I wanted to keep you separate. Safe. Outside of everything I am." "I know. But Marchetti," he stopped. Exhaled slowly. "He's been watching me for months. Trying to find something he can use. And now he knows about you." Charlotte felt her pulse quicken. "What does that mean?" "It means I can't hide you anymore. Not the way I wanted to." He reached out then, his fingers brushing a lock of hair away from her face. "It means you have to decide if you're in this with me. All the way. Knowing what it might cost." She looked at him. This man who brought her sweet potato pie and called her every night at 11. This man who ran an empire and killed people and somehow still looked at her like she was the only light in the room. She thought about her grandmother who always said love was easy to find and hard to keep. Who said the right man wouldn't ask you to be less than yourself. He'd build a world where you could be more. Oronzo wasn't asking her to shrink. He was asking her to choose. So she did. "I'm in," Charlotte said. "All the way." His hand slid to the back of her neck. Gentle but firm. His forehead pressed against hers. "I will never let anyone hurt you," he murmured. "Never. Do you understand me?" "I understand. And we are never breaking up. Not for Marchetti. Not for anyone. There's no future where we're not together. I decided that the night you saved my brother's life." Charlotte's breath caught. "Enzo. I know it sounds insane. I know you have every reason to doubt me. But I'm telling you the truth. I've never been more certain of anything." She pulled back just enough to look at him. To see his face fully. He meant it. Every word. And despite everything, the danger, the uncertainty, the world that was closing in around them, she believed him. She leaned up and pressed her lips to his. Soft. Brief. A promise more than a kiss. When she pulled back, he was watching her with something like wonder. "Okay," she whispered. "Then let's figure out what comes next." He nodded once. Took her hand. Led her to the kitchen table where dinner was waiting. Outside the world was hunting them. But in that moment, in that quiet brownstone in Montclair, They ate together like two people who had all the time in the world. For 2 weeks, Charlotte lived between worlds. During the day, she worked her shifts at Newark, Beth Israel. Smiled at patients. Took vitals. Charted medications. Pretended everything was normal. At night, Marco drove her to the brownstone in Montclair. She slept in Oronzo's bed, ate meals he cooked himself, and learned the rhythms of a life she'd never imagined. He was different at the safe house. Quieter. More present. He asked about her patients, remembered their names, followed up on the ones she worried about. He rubbed her feet after long shifts without being asked. He held her in the dark and told her stories about his mother who died when he was 12, and his brother Sal who was recovering in a private facility upstate. She learned that he read philosophy before bed. That he hated onions but loved garlic. That he prayed every morning, old Italian prayers his grandmother taught him, even though he said God had stopped listening years ago. She learned that when he said forever he meant it like a contract. Non-negotiable. Binding. But she also learned that the world outside their walls was getting smaller. Oronzo took calls at all hours. Sometimes he stepped outside. Sometimes he just went quiet, his jaw tightening as he listened to whatever news was coming through. He never told her the details, but she saw the weight accumulating on his shoulders. More men stationed outside the brownstone. Fewer trips out of the house. A tension in Marco's posture that hadn't been there before. Marchetti was circling. On the 14th night, Charlotte woke at 3 a.m. to find Oronzo sitting on the edge of the bed. His back was to her. His head was bowed. He was holding his phone but the screen was dark. She sat up slowly. Reached out and touched his shoulder. He flinched. Just slightly. Then his hand came up to cover hers. "Did I wake you?" he asked without turning around. "What happened?" He was silent for a long moment. She could feel the tension in his muscles, the way he was holding himself together by force of will. "Marchetti sent a message tonight," he finally said. "One of my warehouses in Elizabeth. Burned to the ground. 3 of my men inside." Charlotte's stomach dropped. Dead. 2 dead. 1 in critical condition. He paused. They were good men. Loyal. They had families. She moved closer. Pressed her forehead against his back. Wrapped her arms around him from behind. He didn't pull away. But he didn't relax either. "This is what I am, Charlotte." His voice was rough. "This is the life you're choosing. People die because of decisions I make. Because of who I am. You didn't burn that warehouse." "No. But I'm the reason it was a target." She held him tighter. "And walking away would make the deaths stop?" He didn't answer. "If you disappeared tomorrow," she continued quietly, "would Marchetti suddenly become peaceful? Would all the violence end?" "No. Then this isn't about what you do. It's about what he does. And you're the one trying to stop him." Oronzo turned then. Fully. His eyes found hers in the darkness. "You really believe that?" "I believe you're not the villain in this story. Even if the world doesn't know the difference." He looked at her for a long time. She watched something shift in his expression. The weight didn't leave but it seemed to redistribute. Like he was letting her carry part of it. His hand came up to cup her face. His thumb traced her lower lip. "I don't deserve you," he murmured. "Probably not." She allowed herself a small smile. "But here we are." He almost laughed. Almost. The corner of his mouth twitched and he leaned forward to kiss her forehead, then her nose, then finally her lips. The kiss was slow. Careful. Like he was memorizing her all over again. When he pulled back, his forehead rested against hers. "I need to handle this," he said. "Marchetti has to be dealt with. Permanently. But I need you to do something for me first." "What?" "I need you to meet with my consigliere tomorrow. His name is Dante. He's going to explain some things. Legal protections, financial arrangements. Things that will keep you safe if something happens to me." Charlotte's chest tightened. "If something happens to you? Nothing will happen to me." He said it firmly. "But I plan for every outcome. That's how I've stayed alive this long. And you're too important to leave unprotected." She wanted to argue. Wanted to refuse. But she saw the logic even if she hated what it implied. "Okay," she said. "I'll meet with him." "Thank you." He pulled her back down onto the bed. Held her against his chest with both arms, like he was shielding her from something she couldn't see. She fell asleep to the sound of his heartbeat. The next morning, Dante arrived at the brownstone. He was older than Charlotte expected. Mid-60s, silver hair slicked back, wearing a suit that probably cost more than her monthly rent. He carried a leather briefcase and spoke with the careful diction of a man who'd spent decades choosing his words precisely. They sat in the dining room. Oronzo was present but stayed near the window watching the street. Giving them space, Dante explained the arrangements. Bank accounts in her name. Property holdings that would transfer automatically if Oronzo died. A legal trust that would protect her from any investigation into the Fallaci family's affairs. Charlotte listened. Asked questions. Signed where she was told to sign. But halfway through something occurred to her. "Why are you telling me all this now?" she asked Dante. He said he plans for every outcome. But this feels urgent. Like something specific is about to happen. Dante glanced at Oronzo. Oronzo turned from the window. His expression was unreadable. "Because something is about to happen," he said. "In 3 days I'm meeting with Marchetti. Face to face. To end this." Charlotte's heart stopped. "What?" "It's the only way. He won't stop until one of us is dead. I'd rather choose the time and place than wait for him to choose it for me." "And you're telling me this now? After I sign papers? After?" "I'm telling you now because I wanted you to be protected first." He crossed the room. Stood in front of her. "I'm telling you now because I don't keep secrets from you. Not anymore." She stared up at him. Felt the fear rising in her chest, hot and sharp. "You could die." "I won't." "You don't know that." He knelt in front of her chair. Took both her hands in his. "Charlotte, look at me." She did. His eyes were steady. "Certain. I have survived 23 years in this life. I've buried my father, my uncle, 2 cousins and more friends than I can count. I'm still here. And I'm not leaving you. Not now. Not ever. You can't promise that." "I can. And I am." He squeezed her hands. 3 days from now Marchetti will be gone. And we'll have the rest of our lives to be together. No more hiding. No more safe houses. Just us. She wanted to believe him. God, she wanted to. But she'd seen enough death in her work to know that promises didn't stop bullets. "What if you're wrong?" she whispered. He leaned forward. Pressed his lips to her forehead. "Let them linger. Then you'll be taken care of. You'll be safe. And you'll know that you were the best thing that ever happened to me." A tear slipped down her cheek. He caught it with his thumb. "But I'm not wrong," he continued. "So stop crying. And trust me one more time." She closed her eyes. Let out a shaky breath. "So no, you're not helpless. You're the most important part of this. You're why I'm going to win tomorrow. Because I refuse to die before I get to spend the rest of my life with you." A tear slipped down her cheek. She didn't bother wiping it away. "That's a lot of pressure," she whispered. He laughed. A real laugh, unexpected and warm. "You can handle it." She leaned into him. Pressed her face against his chest. Let him hold her in the quiet kitchen while the tea went cold on the counter. After a long moment she pulled back. "I need to ask you something," she said. "And I need you to answer honestly. Anything. After tomorrow, if everything goes the way you're planning, what happens to us?" He tilted his head. "What do you mean?" "I mean, what does our life look like? Do we stay hidden? Do I keep working at the hospital? Do we?" She hesitated. "Do we ever get to be normal?" Oronzo was quiet for a moment. Thinking. "I've been running the Fallaci family since I was 24, he finally said. 15 years. I've never known anything else." "That's not an answer." "I'm getting there." He took her hands in his. "After Marchetti is gone, there will be a period of consolidation. 6 months, maybe a year. I'll need to make sure everything is stable. That no one else rises up to take his place. And after that?" His eyes met hers. "After that I step back. Hand the day-to-day to someone I trust. Stay involved enough to protect the family, but not so involved that I can't have a life outside of it." Charlotte stared at him. "You'd do that?" "I'd do anything for you." He said it simply. Like it was obvious. "I thought you knew that by now." She shook her head slowly. Not in denial. "I wonder. I know you love me," she said. "But I didn't know you'd change your whole life for me." "It's not a change. It's a choice." He lifted her hands to his lips. Kissed her knuckles. The only choice that matters. She felt something shift inside her. A wall she hadn't known she was still holding up, finally crumbling. Okay, she said softly. Okay, what? Okay, I believe you. She stepped closer. Rose up on her toes. I believe that you're going to come back tomorrow. I believe that we're going to have a life together. I believe all of it. His arms wrapped around her. Pulled her close. Finally, he murmured into her hair. They stood like that for a long time. Holding each other in the dark kitchen. Two people on the edge of something terrifying and something beautiful. Eventually Oronzo pulled back. Looked at her with soft eyes. Come back to bed, he said. I need a few more hours with you before tomorrow. She nodded. Let him lead her back to the bedroom. They didn't sleep. Not really. They lay facing each other talking in whispers about nothing important. Favorite movies. Childhood memories. The trip to Italy he wanted to take her on once this was over. Somewhere around 4 a.m. she asked him about the tattoo on his chest. The one directly over his heart. She'd noticed it before but never asked. He was quiet for a moment. Then he took her hand and placed it flat against his chest. It's a compass, he said. I got it when I was 19. My father had just died and I was lost. Didn't know who I was supposed to be or what I was supposed to do. What does it mean? It was supposed to remind me to find my own direction. To stop letting other people tell me who I was. Did it work? He smiled. A small private smile. It took 15 years. But eventually, yes. He pressed her hand more firmly against his chest. The compass led me to you. Charlotte felt her eyes sting. She leaned forward and kissed him. Fully. Deeply. Pouring everything she felt into the space between them. When they finally broke apart, the first gray light of dawn was creeping through the curtains. Tomorrow was here. Oronzo held her face in his hands. Looked at her like he was memorizing every detail. I love you, Charlotte Clemente. I love you too, Oronzo Fallaci. He kissed her forehead. Then her nose. Then her lips one more time. I'll be home by dinner, he said. Save me a plate. She nodded. Didn't trust her voice. He got up. Dressed in a dark suit. The tattoos disappeared beneath white cotton and black wool. At the bedroom door he paused. Looked back at her. Forever, he said. Forever, she whispered back. Then he was gone. Then she opened them and nodded. One more time, she said. He kissed her. Hard and brief and full of everything he couldn't say out loud. When he pulled back his eyes were bright. 3 days, he said. And then forever. The night before the meeting Charlotte couldn't sleep. She lay in the dark listening to Oronzo breathe beside her. His arm was draped across her waist, heavy and warm. His face was relaxed in a way it never was during the day. She studied him in the faint light from the window. The sharp line of his jaw. The scar above his left eyebrow that he never explained. The tattoos that disappeared beneath the sheets. Tomorrow he would walk into a room with a man who wanted him dead. And she would wait here in this brownstone with nothing to do but pray. She wasn't built for waiting. Carefully she slipped out from under his arm. Pulled on a sweater and padded to the kitchen. Made herself tea she didn't want just to have something to do with her hands. The house was quiet. Marco and another guard were outside watching the street. The brownstone felt like a held breath. She was standing at the counter when she heard footsteps behind her. You're supposed to be sleeping. Oronzo's voice was rough with exhaustion. So are you. He came up behind her. Wrapped his arms around her waist. Rested his chin on her shoulder. Couldn't sleep without you, he murmured. Liar. You were out cold. I was pretending. Hoping you'd stay. She almost smiled. Almost. I keep thinking about tomorrow, she admitted. About all the things that could go wrong. Nothing will go wrong. You keep saying that. But Marchetti has people too. Resources. He's been planning this just as long as you have. Oronzo turned her around to face him. His hands settled on her hips. Let me tell you something about Marchetti, he said. He's ambitious. Ruthless. But he's also arrogant. He thinks he's smarter than everyone around him. That's why he's agreed to meet. He believes he's walking into a trap he's set himself. And he's not. No. A dangerous smile flickered across Oronzo's face. He's walking into mine. Charlotte searched his eyes. You already know how this ends. I've known for weeks. I just needed to get the pieces in place. And the pieces are in place now? They will be by tomorrow afternoon. She let out a breath she didn't know she'd been holding. Why didn't you tell me? Because I needed you to be scared. She blinked. What? He cupped her face in his hands. If you weren't scared, you wouldn't have signed those papers. You would have argued with me. Told me you didn't need protection. Insisted on being involved. So you manipulated me. I kept you safe. His thumb stroked her cheekbones. There's a difference. She should have been angry. Part of her was. But a larger part understood. You knew I'd figure it out, she said quietly. I knew you were too smart not to. I was just buying time. Time for what? Time to make sure that no matter what happens tomorrow, you'll be okay. He leaned his forehead against hers. That's all I've ever wanted, Charlotte. For you to be okay. She closed her eyes. Let herself feel the weight of his hands on her face. The steadiness of his presence. I'm not going to lie to you and say I'm fine with this, she said. I hate that you're walking into danger. I hate that I can't do anything to help. I hate that I have to sit here and wait like some. You're not helpless. His voice was firm. You're the reason I'm fighting at all. Before you I was just surviving. Running the family because it was expected. Going through the motions because I didn't know what else to do. He pulled back. Looked at her with an intensity that made her chest ache. You gave me something to live for. Something beyond the business, beyond the power, beyond all of this. He gestured vaguely at the world outside. You made me want a future. A real one. With you. Charlotte's throat tightened. Enzo. The hours passed like years. Charlotte tried to keep busy. She made the bed. Cleaned the kitchen. Reorganized the pantry for no reason other than needing something to do with her hands. By noon she'd run out of distractions. She sat on the couch in the living room, her phone clutched in her hands. Oronzo had given her a number to call if there was an emergency. But he'd also told her not to expect contact until it was over. No news is good news, he'd said. If something goes wrong, Marco will come get you. So she watched the door. And she waited. The brownstone was too quiet. Every creak of the old floors made her jump. Every car that passed outside sent her heart racing. She thought about her grandmother. What she would say if she knew where Charlotte was. Who she was with. Her grandmother had always been practical about love. You don't choose who your heart wants, she used to say. You just choose whether you're brave enough to follow it. Charlotte had followed hers straight into the arms of a mafia boss. And now she was sitting in a safe house waiting to find out if he was still alive. At 2:47 p.m. her phone rang. Not the burner. Her real phone. She looked at the screen. Unknown number. Her thumb hovered over the decline button. But something made her answer. Hello. Silence on the other end. Then a voice she didn't recognize. Charlotte Clemente? Her blood went cold. Who is this? My name doesn't matter. What matters is that I have information about Oronzo Fallaci. She stood up. Her legs felt unsteady. What kind of information? The kind that determines whether he lives or dies today. The voice was calm. Almost pleasant. I'm calling to offer you a choice. Charlotte's mind raced. This wasn't part of the plan. Oronzo hadn't mentioned anyone contacting her. I don't know what you're talking about, she said carefully. Yes you do. You know exactly who I am. Marketti. The name flashed through her mind like a warning siren. What do you want? She asked. I want you to listen. His voice hardened slightly. Right now, Oronzo believes he's walking into a trap he's set for me. He's wrong. I've known about his plan for weeks. My people are already in position. Charlotte's chest tightened. You're lying. Am I? Ask yourself, how did I get this number? How do I know where you are? How do I know that you're alone in a brownstone in Montclair while your boyfriend walks into his own funeral? She couldn't breathe. The walls were closing in. What do you want? She repeated. I want you to leave. Walk out the front door. Get in the car that's waiting for you at the end of the block. Come to me. Why would I do that? Because if you don't, Oronzo dies. Simple as that. Marchetti paused. But if you come willingly, I'll let him live. He loses you, but he keeps his life. A fair trade, don't you think? Charlotte's hand was shaking. The phone felt impossibly heavy. You expect me to believe you'll just let him go? I expect you to believe that I'm a businessman. Killing Oronzo Fallaci is expensive. It creates chaos. It invites retaliation. But taking something he loves, something he can never get back, that's a different kind of victory. His voice dropped lower. I don't need him dead. I just need him broken. She closed her eyes. Thought about Oronzo's face this morning. The way he'd looked at her before he left. Forever he'd said, "How do I know you're telling the truth?" she asked. About having people in position. About any of this. You don't. That's the beauty of it. You have to decide whether you trust your own judgment or whether you trust his. Charlotte's mind was spinning. She thought about every conversation she'd had with Oronzo. Every time he'd reassured her. Every time he'd promised he had everything under control. He was smart. Careful. He'd survived 15 years in this world. But Marchetti had survived too. I need time to think, she said. You have 5 minutes. The car will wait. After that my offer expires and so does Oronzo. The line went dead. Charlotte stood frozen in the middle of the living room. Her heart was pounding so hard she could hear it in her ears. This was a trap. It had to be. Marchetti was trying to use her to get to Oronzo. If she walked out that door she was playing right into his hands. But what if he wasn't lying? What if Oronzo really was walking into an ambush? She thought about the papers she'd signed. The legal protections. The bank accounts. Oronzo had prepared for the possibility of his own death. He told her that himself. He planned for every outcome. Which meant some part of him knew this could go wrong. She looked at the front door. Then at the phone in her hand. 5 minutes. She had to make a choice. Her grandmother's voice echoed in her head. You don't choose who your heart wants. You just choose whether you're brave enough to follow it. Charlotte took a breath. Then another. And then she made her decision. She walked to the front door. Opened it. Marco was standing on the porch, his hand already reaching for his weapon. Miss Clemente? What's wrong? I just got a call from Marchetti, she said. He knows where I am. He says he has people in position to kill Oronzo. Marco's face went pale. That's not possible. He knew my phone number. He knew I was alone. He knew about the brownstone. She met his eyes. Something's wrong, Marco. We need to warn him. Marco was already pulling out his phone. Dialing a number. Right. No answer. Damn it. Marco tried another number. Same result. Charlotte's stomach dropped. What does that mean? It means communications are down. Either they're in a dead zone or... He stopped. Didn't finish the sentence. Or someone's jamming them, Charlotte finished. Marco looked at her. For the first time since she'd met him she saw fear in his eyes. Get back inside, he said. Lock the door. I'm going to... No. He blinked. What? I'm not staying here. Charlotte's voice was steady. Calmer than she felt. Marchetti gave me a choice. Come to him or watch Oronzo die. He said there's a car at the end of the block. You can't be serious. I'm not going to sit here and wait while the man I love walks into an ambush. She stepped off the porch. I'm going to find that car. And I'm going to find out what Marchetti really wants. Marco grabbed her arm. Miss Clemente, if you go with him you're dead. You understand that, right? Oronzo would never forgive me if I let you. Then come with me. She turned to face him. You said communications are down. You can't reach anyone. But if I go to Marchetti at least we'll know where he is. At least we'll have a chance to do something. Marco stared at her for a long moment. She could see him calculating. Weighing the options. Finally he let go of her arm. If we do this, he said slowly, we do it my way. I make the calls. You follow my lead. Charlotte nodded. Agreed. Marco pulled out a second phone. One she hadn't seen before. He typed a message quickly then shoved it back in his pocket. That's our backup plan, he said. If we're not back in 2 hours people will come looking. Good. He looked at her with something that might have been respect. You're either the bravest woman I've ever met, he said, or the craziest. Maybe both. He almost smiled. They walked together to the end of the block. A black sedan was waiting there, engine idling. Charlotte took a breath. Thought about Oronzo. About forever. Then she opened the door and got in. The sedan moved through the streets of Montclair without hurry. Charlotte sat in the back seat, her hands folded in her lap to keep them from shaking. Marco was beside her, his body angled toward the door, his eyes scanning every intersection they passed. The driver hadn't spoken. Neither had the man in the passenger seat. Both wore dark suits. Both had the same blank expression. Marchetti's men. They drove for 20 minutes. Out of Montclair. Through East Orange. Into Newark. Charlotte watched the neighborhoods change outside the window. Familiar streets she'd driven 100 times on her way to work. Now they looked different. Hostile. Finally, the car stopped in front of a warehouse near the port. Red brick. Faded signage. The kind of building that looked abandoned until you noticed the cameras mounted on every corner. The driver got out first. Opened Charlotte's door. This way. She stepped out. Marco followed close behind. They were led through a side entrance, down a long corridor that smelled like rust and salt water. The fluorescent lights overhead flickered intermittently. Their footsteps echoed off concrete walls. At the end of the corridor was a set of double doors. The driver pushed them open. The room beyond was large. Industrial. And in the center of it stood Marchetti. He was smaller than Charlotte expected. Average height. Thin build. Silver hair cropped close to his skull. He wore a charcoal suit that probably cost more than her car. He didn't look like a monster. He looked like someone's grandfather. That made it worse. Charlotte Clemente. He smiled. Warmly. Like they were old friends. Thank you for accepting my invitation. I didn't have much choice. There's always a choice. He gestured to a chair that had been placed in the middle of the room. Please. Sit. She didn't move. Marchetti's smile faded slightly. I'm not going to hurt you. Not unless you make me. So please, sit. Charlotte glanced at Marco. He gave her a barely perceptible nod. She sat. Marchetti circled her slowly, taking his time, studying her like she was a piece of art he was considering purchasing. You know, I've been watching you for months, he said. Ever since I figured out that Oronzo Fallaci, the cold, calculating head of the Fallaci family, had a weakness. I'm not his weakness. No. Marchetti stopped in front of her. Tilted his head. Then why are you here? Why did you get in that car? Why did you walk into the lion's den for a man you've only known for 8 months? Charlotte met his eyes. Because I love him. Love. Marchetti said the word like it tasted sour. Such a simple explanation for such a complicated emotion. Do you know what love really is, Charlotte? She didn't answer. Love is leverage. He crouched down so they were at eye level. Love is the thing that makes strong men stupid. It's the crack in the armor. The soft spot. The place where the knife slides in easiest. Is that why you wanted me here? To use me as leverage? Partly. He stood again. Walked toward a table near the wall where a phone was sitting. But also because I wanted to see for myself. I wanted to understand what could possibly make Oronzo Fallaci, a man who has never shown weakness, never made a mistake, never let anyone get close, risk everything for a nurse from Newark. He picked up the phone. Dialed a number. And now that I've met you, I think I understand. He looked at her over his shoulder. You're not afraid of him. You see him clearly. The violence. The blood on his hands. And you love him anyway. The phone connected. Marchetti put it on speaker. A voice came through. Oh. Tight with controlled fury. Oronzo's voice. Marchetti. Oronzo. Thank you for answering. I know communications have been difficult today. Where is she? Straight to the point. No games. Charlotte's heart clenched at the sound of him. She's right here. Safe. Unharmed. For now. Marchetti looked at Charlotte. Say hello, my dear. Charlotte leaned toward the phone. Enzo. I'm okay. She heard him exhale. A sharp, relieved sound. I'm coming for you, he said. Don't. Let's not get ahead of ourselves. Marchetti cut him off. We have business to discuss first. There's no business. There's only this. If you touch her, I will burn everything you've ever built to the ground. I will kill every man who's ever worked for you. I will find your family, your friends, everyone you've ever cared about, and I will make them pay for what you've done. Marchetti didn't flinch. If anything, he looked amused. Such passion. Such conviction. He glanced at Charlotte. He really does love you. What do you want, Marchetti? Oronzo's voice was ice. What I've always wanted. Control of the Newark ports. The distribution networks. The political connections you've spent years building. Marchetti paused. In exchange, I'll return your nurse unharmed. You'll step down from the family. Retire somewhere warm. And we'll never speak again. Silence on the other end. Charlotte could feel the weight of it. The impossibility of what Marchetti was asking. He wanted Oronzo to give up everything. His family's legacy. His power. His identity. For her. Enzo, she said softly. Don't. Marchetti raised an eyebrow. Don't give him anything, she continued. Whatever he's threatening, it's not worth. Charlotte. Oronzo's voice cut through. Gentle but firm. Stop. She fell silent. Marchetti. Oronzo's tone shifted. Colder now. More controlled. You've made a mistake. Have I? You think you're holding all the cards. You think because you have Charlotte you have leverage over me. But you've miscalculated. Marchetti's smile faltered. Just slightly. You see, Oronzo continued, I knew you would try something like this. I knew the moment I started planning today that you would find a way to get to her. That's why I let you. Charlotte's blood went cold. Let him. Everything that's happened today, the communications going down, your men intercepting her, this little phone call. I planned for all of it. Oronzo's voice was almost casual now. You think you're in control. But you've been walking into my trap since the moment you woke up this morning. Marchetti's expression hardened. He turned to one of his men. Check the perimeter. The man nodded and hurried out. You're bluffing, Marchetti said into the phone. Am I? Then why are you sweating? Charlotte looked at Marchetti. He was sweating. A thin sheen across his forehead that hadn't been there before. Let me tell you what's going to happen, Oronzo said. In about 3 minutes my men are going to enter that warehouse. They've already taken out your exterior security. They're already inside the building. By the time you realize what's happening, it will be too late. Marchetti grabbed the phone. You're lying. I never lie about the things that matter. The double doors at the far end of the room burst open. Men in black tactical gear poured in. Fast. Silent. Professional. Marchetti's guards reached for their weapons but they were too slow. Within seconds they were on the ground, hands behind their heads. Marco was already moving. He pulled Charlotte out of the chair, positioned himself between her and the chaos. And then through the doors walked Oronzo. He was still wearing the dark suit from this morning. But there was blood on his collar. A cut above his eyebrow. He didn't look at Marchetti. He didn't look at his men. He looked only at her. Charlotte felt her knees go weak. He crossed the room in 5 strides. His hands found her face, her shoulders, her arms. Checking. Making sure. Are you hurt? No. Her voice cracked. I'm okay. He pulled her against his chest. Held her so tight she could barely breathe. I'm sorry, he murmured into her hair. I'm so sorry. I should have told you. I should have. You came. She pressed her face against his neck. That's all that matters. Behind them she heard Marchetti's voice. Desperate now. Oronzo. We can negotiate. We can. Oronzo pulled back from Charlotte. Turned slowly to face his rival. The look in his eyes made Charlotte's blood freeze. You took her, Oronzo said quietly. You put your hands on the woman I love. You threatened her life to get to me. Marchetti backed up a step. I didn't hurt her. She's fine. Look at her, she's fine. That's the only reason you're still breathing. Oronzo walked toward him. Slow. Deliberate. I told you once that I would burn everything you've ever built to the ground. That I would make everyone you've ever cared about pay. He stopped directly in front of Marchetti. Did you think I was exaggerating? Marchetti's face went pale. Your accounts have been frozen. Your properties seized. Your men, the ones who weren't here tonight, have been given a choice. Work for me or disappear. Oronzo tilted his head. Most of them chose wisely. You can't do this. It's already done. Marchetti looked around wildly. At his men on the floor. At the tactical team surrounding him. At Charlotte still standing where Oronzo had left her. What happens now? He asked. His voice was smaller than before. Oronzo considered the question. Now, he said, you go away. Far away. Somewhere I'll never have to see your face again. You leave tonight. And if I ever hear your name again, If you ever come within 1,000 miles of Charlotte or anyone I care about, I will finish what I started. Marchetti stared at him. That's it? You're letting me go. I'm giving you a chance to live. Oronzo's eyes were cold. Take it. Before I change my mind. For a long moment no one moved. Then Marchetti nodded. Once. Quickly. Two of Oronzo's men grabbed him by the arms and led him out. The warehouse fell silent. Oronzo turned back to Charlotte. The coldness in his expression melted away, replaced by something softer. Something tired. He walked back to her. Took her hands in his. It's over, he said. She looked up at him. At the blood on his collar. The exhaustion in his eyes. Is it really? He nodded. Marchetti is finished. His organization is mine now. There's no one left to threaten us. Charlotte exhaled slowly. The tension she'd been carrying for weeks began to release. You let him take me, she said. Not an accusation. Just a fact. I knew he would try. It was the only way to draw him out. He squeezed her hands. I had people watching you the entire time. You were never in real danger. It felt real. I know. His voice dropped. I know. And I'm sorry. She studied his face. The regret there was genuine. You should have told me, she said. If I had told you, you wouldn't have been convincing. Marchetti would have known something was wrong. He lifted her hands to his lips. Kissed her knuckles. I needed him to believe he had won. I needed him to feel safe. So he would let his guard down. Yes. Charlotte was quiet for a moment. Processing. That's incredibly manipulative, she finally said. Yes. And it worked. Yes. She looked at him. At this man who had built an empire on strategy and violence. Who had used her as bait without her knowledge. Who had also sent an army to save her the moment she was in danger. I'm still angry, she said. I know. We're going to have a long conversation about boundaries and honesty. I know. And you're going to make this up to me. For a very long time. The corner of his mouth twitched. I know. She sighed. Then she stepped forward and wrapped her arms around him. Take me home, Enzo. He held her close. Pressed his lips to the top of her head. Anything you want, he murmured. For the rest of our lives. 3 months later, Charlotte stood on a balcony overlooking the Amalfi coast. The sun was setting. Gold and pink light spilled across the water, turning the Mediterranean into something from a painting. The air smelled like salt and lemon trees and the remnants of the dinner they'd just finished. She was wearing a white linen dress. No shoes. Her locks hung loose around her shoulders the way Oronzo liked them. Behind her she heard the balcony door open. His footsteps were quiet on the stone. His arms wrapped around her waist from behind, pulling her back against his chest. You're supposed to be on a call, she said. I was. It ended early. Everything okay? Everything's fine. He pressed a kiss to her temple. The transition is almost complete. Another few weeks and Dante will be handling the day-to-day. Charlotte leaned into him. Let herself feel the solid warmth of his body against hers. 3 months since the warehouse. 3 months since Marchetti disappeared to whatever corner of the world Oronzo had exiled him to. 3 months of slowly, carefully building a new life together. It hadn't been easy. The first few weeks were the hardest. Charlotte had been angry, really angry, about being used as bait without her knowledge. They'd had arguments that lasted for hours. Conversations that went in circles. Moments when she wondered if she'd made a mistake trusting him at all. But Oronzo never got defensive. Never made excuses. He listened. He acknowledged what he'd done wrong. He gave her space when she needed it and stayed close when she didn't. And slowly the anger faded. Not because she forgot. Because she chose to move forward. That was the thing about love, she realized. It wasn't about finding someone perfect. It was about finding someone worth the work. Someone who showed up even when showing up was hard. Oronzo showed up. Every single day. He cooked her breakfast. He rubbed her feet after long flights. He learned her grandmother's sweet potato pie recipe and practiced it until he got it right. He held her when she cried about missing her patients, her job, her old life. He never told her she was being dramatic. He just held her and let her feel whatever she needed to feel. And when she was ready, he helped her find a new path. She was consulting now. working with a nonprofit that trained nurses in underserved communities across the country. It wasn't the same as working in the ER, but it mattered. It was hers. Oronzo had offered to fund the entire organization. She'd said no. He'd respected her decision without argument. That was new too. The respect. The partnership. He wasn't perfect. He still had moments of coldness, of control, of the man he'd been trained to be since childhood. But he was trying. Every day he was trying. And that was enough. "What are you thinking about?" he asked, his breath warm against her ear. "How different my life is now." "Good different or bad different?" She turned in his arms. Faced him. The sunset painted him in warm colors. The sharp lines of his face. The tattoos peeking above his collar. The scar over his eyebrow that she'd finally gotten him to explain. A fight when he was 17. His father's men testing him to see if he was worthy of the family name. He'd been fighting his whole life. For power. For survival. For respect. Now for the first time he was fighting for something softer. A future that wasn't written in blood. "Good different," she said. "Terrifying. But good." He smiled. A real smile, not the controlled one he used for business. "I have something for you," he said. "Another gift. And so we talked about this. You can't just keep buying me things every time you feel guilty. This isn't about guilt." He reached into his pocket. "This is about something else." He pulled out a small velvet box. Charlotte's heart stopped. "Enzo. Let me talk." His voice was steady, but she could see his hand trembling slightly. "I've never been good with words. Not the emotional kind. I've spent my whole life speaking in threats and negotiations and carefully calculated statements." He opened the box. Inside was a ring. Simple. Elegant. A single diamond on a gold band. "But with you I don't want to calculate. I don't want to negotiate. I just want to tell you the truth." He took her hand. The one without the ring for now. "I love you, Charlotte Clemente. I have loved you since the night you looked at me in that hospital hallway and asked if I was okay. No one had asked me that in years. Maybe ever." His thumb stroked her knuckles. "You make me want to be better. Not just for you, for myself. You make me believe that I can have a life outside of all this. That I deserve one." He lifted his eyes to hers. Dark and serious and more vulnerable than she'd ever seen them. "I told you once that we would never break up. That there was no future where we weren't together. I meant it then. I mean it now." He took a breath. "Marry me. Not because I'm asking you to. Because you want to. Because you choose me the way I choose you. Every day. For the rest of our lives." Charlotte looked at him. At this man who had killed and lied and manipulated. Who had also held her through nightmares and learned her grandmother's recipes and flown across the world to give her a sunset. He was complicated. Messy. Dangerous. He was also hers. "Yes," she said. He blinked. "Yes. Yes, Enzo. I'll marry you." For a moment he just stared at her. Like he hadn't actually expected her to say it. Like he'd been bracing for rejection even while he hoped for acceptance. Then his face broke into something she'd never seen before. Pure, unguarded joy. He slid the ring onto her finger. His hands were shaking. Then he pulled her close and kissed her. It wasn't like their other kisses. Not careful. Not restrained. This one was a promise. A seal. A beginning. When they finally broke apart, both of them were breathing hard. Charlotte's cheeks were wet, though she didn't remember starting to cry. Oronzo wiped her tears with his thumbs. Gently. Reverently. "Forever," he said. "Forever," she whispered back. He pressed his forehead against hers. Closed his eyes. They stood like that as the sun finished setting. Two people who had found each other in the most unlikely circumstances. Who had survived threats and secrets and their own fears. Who had chosen each other anyway. Later that night they lay in bed together. Charlotte's head was on his chest, her fingers tracing the compass tattoo over his heart. "I need to tell you something," she said quietly. "Anything. I was scared today. Before you proposed." He shifted slightly, looking down at her. "Scared of what?" "Scared that this was too good. That something would go wrong. That Marchetti would come back or someone else would take his place, or you would change your mind about wanting a different life." Oronzo was quiet for a moment. "Do you still feel that way?" She considered the question carefully. "No," she finally said. "Not anymore." "What changed?" She lifted her head. Looked at him. You gave me time. You let me be angry. You didn't rush me or pressure me or make me feel guilty for having doubts. She paused. That's how I knew you meant it. Not because of the words you said. Because of what you did. He reached up and tucked a lock behind her ear. I will spend the rest of my life proving it to you, he said. Every day. In every way I can. She believed him. She leaned down and kissed him softly. Then she settled back against his chest. I love you, Oronzo Fallaci. I love you too, Charlotte Clemente. He paused. Soon to be Charlotte Fallaci. She smiled against his skin. We'll talk about the name. He laughed. A low, rumbling sound she felt more than heard. Whatever you want, he said. Whatever you want. Outside, the stars were coming out over the Mediterranean. Inside, two people fell asleep wrapped around each other, holding on like they never intended to let go. Because they didn't. The wedding was small. 50 people. A vineyard in Tuscany. White flowers everywhere and the smell of olive groves drifting through the open windows. Charlotte wore a dress that had belonged to Oronzo's mother. Ivory silk. Simple lines. It had been altered to fit her perfectly, and when she looked in the mirror that morning she barely recognized herself. Not because she looked different. Because she felt different. Settled. Certain. Home. Her grandmother couldn't make the trip. Her health had been declining for months. But she'd sent a video message that Charlotte watched 3 times before the ceremony. In it, her grandmother said she was proud. That Charlotte had found a man who looked at her like she was the answer to a question he'd been asking his whole life. That's the only kind of love worth having, her grandmother said. The kind that makes someone brave enough to change. Charlotte carried those words with her down the aisle. Oronzo was waiting at the end. Dark suit. White shirt open at the collar. The compass tattoo just visible beneath the fabric. He didn't smile when he saw her. He did something else. Something that hit her harder than any smile could. He exhaled. Like he'd been holding his breath for months. Like the sight of her walking toward him finally let him breathe again. She reached him. Took his hands. The officiant spoke. They exchanged vows. Traditional words mixed with their own. Charlotte promised to challenge him. To call him out when he was wrong. To love him even when loving him was hard. Oronzo promised to listen. To change. To spend every day earning the trust she'd given him. And I promise, he said, his voice rough, that we will never break up. Not today. Not ever. There is no version of my life that doesn't include you. Charlotte laughed through her tears. You really like that line, don't you? It's not a line. His eyes held hers. It's a fact. They exchanged rings. The officiant pronounced them married. And when Oronzo kissed her, the 50 people gathered in that vineyard erupted into applause. But Charlotte barely heard them. All she heard was his heartbeat against her chest. All she felt was his hands on her face. All she knew was that somehow, impossibly, she had found her person. The reception lasted until midnight. There was dancing. Toasts. Marco gave a speech that made everyone laugh and Oronzo pretend to be annoyed. Dante read a poem in Italian that Charlotte didn't fully understand but that made several of the older guests cry. By the time the last guests left, Charlotte's feet ached and her cheeks hurt from smiling. She and Oronzo walked back to the villa they'd rented for the week. The night air was cool. Stars scattered across the Tuscan sky like spilled diamonds. He held her hand the entire way. How do you feel? He asked. Exhausted. Happy. Like I might float away if you let go. His grip tightened. Then I won't let go. They reached the villa. He opened the door for her, then surprised her by lifting her off her feet. Enzo. Tradition, he said simply, carrying her across the threshold. He set her down in the living room. A fire was already burning in the hearth. Candles flickered on every surface. Someone had scattered rose petals across the floor. Did you plan this? She asked. I planned everything. He turned her to face him. Every detail. Every moment. I wanted today to be perfect for you. It was. He cupped her face in his hands. Looked at her with that intensity that still made her stomach flutter. I need you to know something, he said. This isn't just about today. This is about every day after. I meant what I said in my vows. I will spend the rest of my life earning you. You don't have to earn me. You already have me. Then I'll spend the rest of my life deserving you. She smiled. rose up on her toes, pressed her lips to his. The kiss deepened. His hands moved to her waist, her back, her hair. Hers found his chest, his shoulders, the warm skin beneath his collar. Eventually they made their way to the bedroom. The fire crackled. The candles burned low. And Charlotte Fallaci, she decided to take his name after all, fell asleep in her husband's arms, feeling safer than she'd ever felt in her life. 6 months later they were back in Newark. The brownstone in Montclair was gone. They'd bought a house in a quieter neighborhood. A place with a garden and a porch and enough space for the life they were building. Oronzo had kept his promise. He'd stepped back from the daily operations of the family. Dante handled most of the business now. Oronzo was still consulted on major decisions, but his days of late-night calls and sudden disappearances were over. Charlotte's nonprofit had grown. She traveled occasionally for work, but she was always home by the end of the week. Always back in his arms. They'd found a rhythm. A balance. It wasn't perfect. They still argued sometimes. She still got frustrated with his overprotective instincts. He still struggled with vulnerability. But they worked at it. Every day. On a Tuesday morning in early spring, Charlotte woke up before dawn. She slipped out of bed without waking Oronzo. Padded to the bathroom. Closed the door quietly behind her. Her hands were shaking as she opened the box. 3 minutes later she had her answer. She stared at the test for a long time. 2 pink lines. Clear and unmistakable. Pregnant. She was pregnant. Charlotte sat down on the edge of the bathtub. Pressed her hand to her stomach. Tried to breathe. They'd talked about children. Vaguely. Someday they'd said. When the time was right. Was the time right? She thought about her life. The nonprofit. The travel. The fragile peace they'd built in the wake of Marchetti's exile. She thought about Oronzo. The man who had grown up in violence. Who had learned to lead through fear and strategy. Who was still learning how to love without armor. Would he be ready for this? Would she? The bathroom door opened. Oronzo stood in the doorway. Rumpled. Half asleep. Wearing only his boxer shorts. Charlotte. His voice was rough with sleep. What's wrong? She looked up at him. At this man who had promised her forever and meant it. Nothing's wrong, she said softly. He frowned. Stepped closer. His eyes dropped to her hand and to the test she was still holding. He went very still. Is that? Yes. And it's positive. Silence. Charlotte watched his face. Watched the emotions flicker across his features too quickly to name. Confusion. Something that might have been fear. And then, slowly, something else. Wonder. We're having a baby, he said. Not a question. We're having a baby. He exhaled. A shaky, disbelieving sound. Then he crossed the room in 2 steps, pulled her to her feet and kissed her so deeply she forgot to breathe. When he pulled back his eyes were wet. I don't know how to be a father, he admitted. His voice cracked. I never had one. Not really. Not the kind who teaches you how to be good. Charlotte touched his face. You'll learn. We both will. What if I fail? What if I'm not? Enzo. She silenced him with a finger to his lips. You spent 15 years surviving in a world that tried to destroy you. You changed your entire life for me. For us. She took his hand and pressed it to her stomach. You will figure this out. Because that's what you do. He stared at her hand on his. At the place where their child was growing. I'm terrified, he whispered. Good. She smiled. So am I. He laughed then. A broken, joyful sound that filled the small bathroom. He pulled her close again. Held her like she was the only solid thing in a spinning world. Forever, he murmured into her hair. Forever, she agreed. They stood like that until the sun came up. 8 months later, Charlotte gave birth to a healthy baby girl. They named her Elena after Oronzo's mother. She had Charlotte's eyes and Oronzo's stubbornness. She cried at odd hours and refused to sleep through the night and made both of them question their sanity on a daily basis. They had never been happier. On Elena's 1-month birthday, a package arrived at the house. No return address. No note. Inside was a small wooden box. Charlotte opened it while Oronzo was feeding Elena in the next room. She froze. Inside the box was a single photograph. Black and white. It showed 2 men shaking hands in front of a building Charlotte recognized. Newark Beth Israel Medical Center. One of the men was young, maybe 25, with dark hair and a familiar jawline. The other man was older, silver-haired, thin, markety. Charlotte flipped the photograph over. On the back in faded handwriting were 2 words. Your father. She stared at the photograph. At the young man who looked so much like her. At the hospital where she'd worked for years. At the hand he was shaking. Her father. The father she'd never known. The man who had abandoned her mother before Charlotte was born. The man she'd spent her whole life not thinking about. He knew Marchetti. Oronzo appeared in the doorway. Elena was asleep against his shoulder. What's that? He asked. Charlotte looked up at him. At her husband. At her daughter. At the life she'd built. He thought about the photograph. About the questions it raised. About the past she'd spent 32 years ignoring. I don't know, she said honestly. But I think our story isn't over yet. Oronzo's expression shifted. He crossed the room. Looked at the photograph. His jaw tightened. Marchetti, he said quietly. Yes. He was silent for a long moment. Processing. Then he looked at her. His eyes were steady. Certain. Whatever this is, he said, we face it together. You, me and Elena. As a family. Charlotte nodded slowly. She slipped the photograph back into the box. Set it aside. Some questions could wait. Some answers didn't need to be found today. Right now she had a husband who loved her. A daughter who needed her. A life she'd never imagined and wouldn't trade for anything. The rest would come when it came. And when it did she would be ready. Some people think love is supposed to be easy. Effortless. Like finding the right person means the hard part is over. But the truth is, love is a choice you make every day. Sometimes it's easy. Sometimes it's the hardest thing you'll ever do. Charlotte and Oronzo came from different worlds. He was built for violence. She was built for healing. They had every reason to walk away from each other. But they didn't. They fought for each other. They made mistakes and apologized and tried again. They let each other in even when letting someone in felt like a risk. And in the end that's what made them work. Not perfection. Not the absence of problems. Just 2 people who looked at each other and said, I choose you. Today. Tomorrow. No matter what. That's the kind of love worth waiting for. Thank you for staying with me through this one. If you made it to the end, I hope you felt something real. If you haven't subscribed yet, now's a good time. We tell stories like this every week. The kind that hurt before they heal. The kind that stay with you after they're done. Drop a comment and let me know where you're watching from tonight. And tell me, which part of Charlotte and Oronzo's story stayed with you the most? Was it the warehouse? The proposal? That photograph at the end? I read every single comment. And I'll see you in the next one.